Today we're going to dig into some of the language that is used in Two Roads. Today we're going to analyze the variety of English used by Possum in Chapter 16 of Two Roads. Earlier in this unit, we talked about a phenomenon that's called code switching. Remember that this is what happens when people change from one language or style of a language to another. Possum was code switching when he was speaking to adults at schools versus when he was speaking to other students. As just a reminder, there is no one correct form of any language. All languages and varieties of language are valuable and have considerable worth to cultures, communities, and our everyday lives. The variety of language we use is often closely tied to our own identities, and we need to try to avoid thinking of languages or language varieties that are different than ours as wrong or improper. Let's take a quick second to talk about the term Standard English. This is a term that's usually used to refer to the variety of English that is spoken and written by a lot of people in the United States. It is also the variety of English that is usually taught in schools, and it's likely the variety of English that your teachers use. For example, the way that I am speaking and the way that I have written in this lesson is using Standard English. Although lots of people around the world use the term Standard English, it means different things depending on where you are. Standard English in the United Kingdoms, for example, is different from Standard English in Scotland, and that is different than Standard English in the United States. Remember that Standard English is just one variety of English, and it is not inherently better or worse than other varieties, like the variety that Possum uses and that we're going to look at today. As we go through this language dive, we are going to really be thinking about one of our guided questions for this unit, and that is, what factors influence our identities? The author highlights the way that a character's language choices emphasize elements of their own identity. As we analyze Possum's language in this lesson, think about the language varieties you use and how it's tied to your own identity. Here is the sentence that we are going to analyze today from chapter 16. It is highlighted in this passage. It says, "Library here ain't worth an owl's hoot." Let's deconstruct and analyze it. First, let's look at this first chunk, library here. The author leaves out the article the in this sentence. He doesn't write the library here or Chalagi's library. He just starts the sentence using the word library. This helps Possum's language sound more relaxed and less formal because he's leaving out some words. One of the other reasons why he might leave out that word is because Cal already knows which library Possum is talking about. So Possum leaves out the or Chalagi's in the sentence because he doesn't need it. Possum uses the word ain't in the sentence. Using that word lets us know more about the kind of English that Possum speaks. Ain't isn't usually a word that is used in Standard English. This helps Possum's language sound more relaxed and less formal, the same way that using just the phrase library here helped us realize that. Possum also doesn't always use the word ain't, which tells us more about his character. He doesn't use this word all of the time. He's just using it in this particular sentence. Finally, we have the phrase worth an owl's hoot, which is a type of figurative language that Possum is using. First, when we're talking about worth, we're talking about something's value. So Possum is talking about the value that the school library has. He's basically talking about whether the school library is good or bad. This phrase, worth an owl's hoot, isn't a very common one for most people, which tells us that Possum's variety of English is probably one that a small group of people speak, or that he might have used or made up this phrase on his own. Possum's using figurative language in this example. An owl's hoot is the sound that owls make, and it's not something that's very valuable to many people. So saying that a library isn't even worth that much, Possum is saying that the library isn't very valuable. We can then make a guess that that probably means that the library doesn't have very many books. This is also figurative language that Possum has likely made up on his own. And if that's the case, that's telling us that Possum is a pretty creative person when it comes to the language that he uses. A lot of the times we will use figurative language when it comes to something's worth. And here's a few more examples of how we might use that. A picture is worth 1,000 words is probably figurative language that you've heard before. It is worth its weight in gold. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, and it's not worth it are all examples. So we can use our analysis of Possum's language to help us understand what it's showing us about his character. And there are a few things that we might walk away understanding about his character. One is that Possum probably feels really comfortable talking to Cal because he's using a very informal way of speaking. He is not speaking the way that he was speaking to adults earlier in the chapter. We also could come away thinking that Possum's pretty creative in how he uses language. He seems to be using figurative language that he probably made up on his own. That's pretty creative to do. And then we also know that he seems to like to use figurative language when he's speaking. That gives us more information about him as a person. Paying attention to the variety of languages that characters use, especially in the book Two Roads, is worth your attention. It's worth paying attention to these things because it helps us better understand characters and their identities. So be on the lookout for different forms of languages in the book Two Roads as well as other texts that you're reading.